Hi everybody. In this presentation we're going to be talking about collaborative practice in special education, including a refresher on the history of special education inclusion, why inclusion is important, the legality of it, and the challenges to inclusion. So the history of special education, you may recall from previous courses, includes the Americans with Disabilities Act, IDEA, and we can't talk about early childhood special education without talking about Head Start and similar programs. The Americans with Disabilities Act is 25 years old this year, and that particular act made it so that Americans with disabilities could have full access to public settings, including transportation, government buildings, school buildings, etc. And IDEA, as you recall, is the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, and that really highlighted and outlined the importance of special education services for children birth through age 21. And then Head Start has been a primary partner in inclusion for the last 55 years. And these three efforts combined have helped transform how young children with disabilities are served. So why is this important? So inclusion is known to benefit both typically developing children and children with disabilities. And studies really do show gains in children with disabilities' cognitive and communication development when they're placed and served in inclusive settings. Of course, they're having to practice their communication. They have typically developing peer support, and children in inclusive settings with disabilities truly rise to the occasion and want to fully participate with their peers, and their peers are serving as role models. And there's undeniable benefits of peer interaction. There's both positive impacts in all areas of development. So let's talk about the legality of inclusion. So IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, supports equal opportunities for all children birth through age 21 who have an identified disability. And then coupled with ADA and Section 504, IDEA is meant to fully support children with disabilities in all areas of their schooling needs. So IDEA identifies the least restrictive environment and the educational supports needed to be successful in a special education setting. And ADA in Section 504 prohibit discrimination on the basis of disability and ensures full participation in public settings as deemed appropriate. And what does this mean for you and for educational settings? This means that schools must provide equal educational opportunities for children with disabilities in the most integrated setting appropriate to the child's needs. And so this helps us identify what least restrictive environment looks like for children with disabilities, and it makes it the law. Like, you must find the least restrictive environment, and you must provide equal and accessible educational opportunities for children with disabilities. So now that we have some of the background, let's talk about the challenges to inclusion. They include that this can be difficult for parents of infants and toddlers to find and keep childcare. Childcare facilities and childcare centers, including family home childcares, often don't have the training and staffing needs that are required of children with disabilities. Families of infants and toddlers report a lack of communication between early intervention, special education preschool, and childcare services, making the transition from one program to another a challenge. When there's a lack of communication between these agencies and programs, it puts all of the hard work on the families to make the communication happen, and that should not be the parent's job, and sometimes it ends up being their job. Beliefs about inclusion are riddled with misinformation. If you have time, if you didn't take Intro to Inclusive Education or The Exceptional Child with me or Davida, you didn't get to watch the film about Sean's story. And Sean's story is from the early 90s when inclusion was really controversial, and it highlights the difference between inclusive settings and separate settings for children with disabilities, and it talks about the history of inclusion and the challenges that parents and children faced and the challenges that teachers faced. So if you're interested, I will put the link in our module here. It's about an hour long, but it's a wonderful documentary providing some of the history and background behind inclusion and the challenges that children and families faced when inclusion was sort of this new idea. There was a lack of qualified and well-trained staff, but that's why you're all here, right? You want to be well-trained, you want to be specialists, and I think that we need more programs like ours to support this idea that we really need to be producing specialists in teacher preparation and not generalists. So I'm really glad that you're all here. There's also a lack of access to training and ongoing training, and oftentimes it's up to you all, or the teachers and the teacher candidates, to search out and find professional development opportunities to continue to grow your skills in your craft. And when we're thinking about childcare and our early childhood settings, we do see an underprepared workforce. And if you recall from our introduction to early childhood education, when we talk about the trilemma in early childhood education, specifically birth to age 5 programs, we see folks who are coming with little or no professional background. But we also see a number of individuals who have worked for many, many years in the field and have practical experience, but very little in the way of professional preparation. And this can be a barrier to full inclusion. Folks are scared of what they don't know, and without adequate training and support, it could be a huge barrier for children and families. There's sometimes a lack of comprehensive services in early childhood education settings, and that's a significant barrier. And that's why we look to programs like Head Start. Head Start in a lot of ways gets things right in terms of comprehensive services. When we think about what Head Start is and who Head Start serves, that's really a model that should and could be replicated. And we have replicated that model here in Washington State through ECAP, the Early Childhood Education and Assistance Program. And what we see in Head Start, oh gosh, I hope those don't pop up on your... Anyway, what we see in Head Start and ECAP are comprehensive services for children with disabilities. And then sometimes there's this limited time and commitment to build partnerships. Not that we don't want to, just we get so overwhelmed and so busy in education that that communication doesn't necessarily happen quickly or in a means that is supportive. But the biggest challenge that we need to consider and talk about in this class is exactly that, the time and commitment to build partnerships. So successful inclusion requires partnerships between parents, early childhood educators, early intervention specialists, special educators, service providers, healthcare providers, and other specialists. So in this week's module, you're going to engage in a discussion, and here's what I would like you to do. I would like for you to list and discuss strategies to build partnerships between lead educational agencies, or LEAs, and other stakeholders to create systems and services that ensure coordination of services for children with disabilities. Be sure to include actionable strategies, so things that you could put on an action plan or things that you could actually do, as well as the soft skills required. And so when you think of someone who is a good communicator or a highly skilled communicator, what qualities or personal characteristics or traits do they possess that make them a good communicator? Be sure that you use the document policy statement on inclusion that's in our module and use some of the strategies as evidence. And then be sure that you include a discussion of the challenges to true partnership. Mary's case that is in this module is a perfect example to provide evidence to back up your strategies. So thanks everybody. Have a great week, and I will see you on Wednesday in a couple of weeks.